Hey guys, so today we're going to be looking at patch 5.18, so the patch that just came out, and this is going to be the one that Worlds is going to be played on. So how the game is now, what we're playing in solo queue, how balanced or not so balanced things are, these are going to be what we're seeing at the World Finals. Now if any of you don't really want to listen to 10 minutes of my British accent, and I have no idea why you wouldn't, then I'm going to sum everything up right at the start here. So this is every single change, what it really means and what it actually is. So first up, Anivia, her E bonus damage now works on Baron and Dragon, so she'll be taking objectives that little bit quicker. And for Braum, the Q cost is now going up, so it's going to be more expensive. Caitlyn's cooldown and the mana on her cupcakes, her W, her traps is going to be down. And for Darius, we now have less heal per champ hit, but more maximum potential heal, and the mana cost is going up as well. So at least his Spiderling base damage is now down. This has nothing to do with her abilities, but just when she's in her spider form, her little spiders that follow her around are going to do a little bit less damage. Ezreal's E now scales with AD instead of just AP, which is actually a kind of cool change for him when he's going into the lane phase, especially because you do sometimes jump in and want to do that bonus damage. Fiora's armor, health, and health per level are down, which makes her weaker pre-6, and with Galio, it's going to be harder to cancel your ultimate by accident. So another Juggernaut change with Garen, you can't now become the villain by killing Garen, you have to kill his allies to actually proc that. With Gangplank, his Keg, his E, his barrels, the damage is down to champions, and the armor pen is down as well. So those are half the champion changes. Yes, this is a big patch, and the first of the second lot is going to be Jarvan. He's slightly more base armor now, which is going to help his early clear a little bit. With Lulu, this is kind of a buff and a nerf, which is why we have the half and half. Like, you have less health per level, which is going to affect her solo lanes and nerf that way, but with her passive, you can now proc the Spell Thief gold, so that's going to be a buff to her support. Mordekaiser, probably the most hated Juggernaut, is getting a bunch of nerfs this patch. You're getting less base armor, but armor per level is going up, so it's going to make him weaker early. His W is the only other thing being changed, and it can now be cast alone on Mord, and it costs health. It's less healing on minions, but it's more damage. Morgana is getting a really small buff this patch, where her Q mana cost is going down, and Skarner, his passive is being fixed, so he's weaker early, and his E slow is going down. Syndra is getting another little buff as well. Her mana per level is going up, and they've also supposedly fixed her E now, so it's going to be more responsive. Tahm Kench just has a bunch of quality of life fixes, no real buffs or anything like that, but with Twitch we're seeing faster stealth now while you're taking damage, which is going to be really good for lane phase. The final two champion changes this patch are to Veigar. You now get AP for assist, which is really good, especially for support Veigar, and your W delay is going down slightly. Finally, Zyra, and this isn't a direct change or anything like that, they've just made her plants more consistent now, so in theory you should be doing more damage because they relocate their targets quicker. The final three changes to this patch are to 3 items. We have the Devourer, Warrior, and Zeke's. With Devourer, you're going to be doing less damage per hit. With Warrior, you get an extra 5 AD, and with Zeke's, the armor is going down, and the duration it's ready for waiting to be activated is down as well. So that was actually a really long summary, but it was just a really big patch. But anyway, now we're going to go on to the things that I actually want to talk about. So the big changes this patch. So the first big change is to Braum, and actually maybe not a big change, but something I want to talk about because he's being played a lot in competitive scene, he's being played a lot in solo queue, and they're increasing the mana cost on his Q. This is just going to mean your random fishing for fights is going to cost more when like you fire out a Q and you hope it hits, but that's not really the best way to do it anyway. The best thing to do is jump to a minion that's near the enemy AD, you hit them once, then you Q point blank, and that gives you 2 charges of your stun, and it's really hard to dodge. Because that's the way you want to do it anyway, and fishing with your Qs is not really the most effective or efficient way of doing it, this nerf isn't actually going to make too much difference. Moving on to Darius, and right now Darius is really strong in lane, and he's okay in team fights, but he's not amazing. Now this change is going to actually make him better in my opinion. Like, this is a nerf, sure, but overall I doubt that 3% extra in lane is going to make too much difference unless he's like really low when he heals. So yeah, like I think actually the maximum heal going up is really good for his team fight. It'll mean that he survives even longer, and I would still ban him unless you can play something like Garen or Fiora, which does okay against him. Speaking of Fiora, like I've always said she's a bit stupid right now, because if she screws up everything, she's still gonna kill you. Having like 0 counterplay like that, even when you outplay someone you still die, just shouldn't happen, and hopefully after these nerfs she'll be a little bit more punishing for her. The idea when you're against Fiora is you beat her before she gets her huge ultimate at level 6, and this makes it a little bit easier to do that. It's still going to be a great pick, but I think picking something early game like Renekton would actually do well against her this patch and shut her down. Another champion like Fiora where you have to kind of beat him early is going to be Gangplank, and actually there isn't too much to say about the Gangplank change really. His kegs or his E barrels, they're just going to do less damage now. It's actually really clever the way it works. Like there's two parts. So the bonus damage to champions will affect his lane phase more, so bring that down a little bit, and also his damage against squishy targets like your enemy mid laner for example. The armor pen change will mean that he does less to tank, so in theory this will bring his whole damage level down against everyone, but I still think he's going to be strong, just not as strong as before. Okay, Mordekaiser. Now I really hate Mord right now, but this is at least going in the right direction. They're making his duo lane healing less, dealing less damage, and generating less passive shield, but they're buffing his solo lane capabilities. Personally, I'm actually fine with that. Like the problem isn't his mid to late game, it's his ridiculous lane phase. Like, okay, this might turn into a little bit of a rant, but AD carries are supposed to be weak early, okay? That's what Riot has done more recently. They brought their power level down early. Now that's fine, okay? We're late game carries, we're not really early game carries, but then why do you put Mord bot lane, who is exactly the opposite? Mord is strong early, has a good lane phase, but he's weak later in team fights, and he completely shuts down AD carries with little counterplay unless you pick strong laners and can punish him in the first few levels. This just doesn't make any sense to me, but yes, he's weaker, but I still think he's very annoying to deal with. The final thing I really want to talk about is Devourer, and I wanted to make a note of this just to say that this isn't as big as it seems. Almost every single Devourer jungler builds attack speed of some sort, whether it's Blade of the Ruined King or Nashor's or Triforce. Like there is some attack speed there, so yes, even though the damage is going down, you attack so often that you probably won't notice it. The idea behind this nerf really, and the warrior buff especially, is to make warrior junglers able to stand up to Devourer junglers and shut them down in the early game. This is actually a good way of doing it without affecting the item too much. Like basically these warrior junglers can now have more effect early, hopefully, and they can gank more and they can snowball their advantage, which means that they kind of win before the Devourer ones take over. So the final 4 changes this patch that I want to talk about are Anivia, Ezreal, Galio, and Lulu, and I'm not going to speak about them specifically, but kind of as a general whole. Now these 4 champions are kind of underrated in their roles, maybe not Lulu so much, but we're talking about Lulu support here a little bit. These guys are all underrated for their respective roles. Like they can all easily carry a game and they can all have a lot of impact. It's just that people don't really play them right now, so these changes hopefully will get people playing them, and then we'll see these guys come back into the meta a little bit. Anyway, that wraps up my patch 5.18 rundown. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think about this patch. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in my next video.